4-1 in red paint circled by a red circle. So that indicates that you are at Area S4, Floor 1. That's the significance there. The first hangar bay, which is right here, this is hangar bay number 1, was none other than Bob Lazar's sport model, or a P-45 sport model. Hangar bay number 2, we believe to be the exact same vehicle, or possibly an ARV, alien reproduction vehicle. Hangar bay 3, ladies and gentlemen, was the Roswell craft, which was covered by a tarp, so Dan didn't get to see the entire configuration, but it was the Roswell craft. Next we have, in the next hangar, which is number 4, is the P-52 Orion craft. The next hangar bay 5 was empty. Hangar bay 6 contained a man-made F-22 conversion, or sort of a dog and pony show of what was in hangar bay 3. So it was a man-made version of the Roswell craft. Up here we have, it's believed to be the 1953 crash retrieval in Kingman, Arizona. That was what was in the next hangar, which is 7. Hangar bay 8 contained a black isosceles triangle that was nicknamed the licorice drop. Hangar bay 9, ladies and gentlemen, was empty. So that's the layout here. Up on the left-hand corner, I've got a very crude gymnasium lighting. That's the important thing to remember. When you're in this facility, it's not impeccable lighting on the first floor, so that's why we have that. Moving over to the right, we have the biohazard suppression area. We have the overflow files department, and then we have the communication area, and then you'll look over to the bottom right here is the meals ready to eat, or the cafeteria, and you'll notice here that the different colors indicate the compartmentalization of the people who work on different programs at Area S4. So if you work on Project Sidekick, or if you work on Project Galileo, you sit in the red area. If you work on weapons research, you sit in the black area. As we mentioned, orange area is Project Looking Glass. So what they're doing is they're quarantining the employees and engineers who work on the different programs so that these things remain secret. Okay, so this is a far look down of the main hallway. As soon as you walk in, you see that red stripe and the blue stripe on the right-hand side. We've got the avionics lab and the propulsion system labs on the immediate left-hand side. Now, right to the left, there is an I Want to Believe poster, confirmed by Dr. Dan Burish. Over to the right, there is a nurse there and a weighing pad. So all this talk about trying to smuggle things out of S4 so that we can prove all this is real, well, it's next to impossible. Why? Because they weigh you in the nude when you get there, and they weigh you in the nude when you get out. And if there's a discrepancy within ounces, it's over. So you've got to be very careful here. Now, 4-1, looking down through the catwalk to the left-hand side. This is the first hangar bay, is the 52-foot diameter Bob Lazar sport model. So we're looking down through the catwalk. Over here we have hangar bay 2, which again is believed to be the same craft or an alien reproduction vehicle. Hangar bay 3 is the P-24 Roswell craft. You'll notice the 4-1, we're at Area S4, Level 1. Now, this is interesting. I did not make this statement, but Dr. Dan Burish and even the late geologist Dr. Phil Schneider indicated that the F-22 Raptor, the exterior configuration of the F-22 Raptor, was originating from the original Roswell craft. That's a very bombshell statement to make, but if you take away the vertical stabilizers on the F-22 Raptor and then you remove the air intakes and then you do something what Dan Burish told me, is if you drew a spline curve and connected all of the major points or intersecting areas on the Raptor, what you'd end up with, ladies and gentlemen, is the Roswell craft. So this comes directly from Dan Burish. Is there any way to prove this? Well, take a look at the historical legacy on the origin point of stealth technology, and we'll start up here. There is a defining feature that goes through all these configurations. You've got the FB-22 up here. We've got a Russian stealth configuration here. Down here to the left, we've got a Northrop configuration. Just to the right of that, we've got the Testers Model Corporation, Rockford, Illinois. the F-19 configuration by Lockheed, and then we've got the configuration from the movie Stealth, which was released in 2005. All these configurations contain the same design model. In fact, they contain the same wing root to fuselage joint, which is completely integrated and smooth contoured, identical to the B-2 stealth bomber, to reduce the radar cross signature. That is the defining design feature on these stealth technologies, the same thing you'll see in the Roswell craft. Hangar Bay 4 was a P-52 Orion craft. This is the original configuration. This is the cleaned up configuration on the bottom side by Dr. Dan Burish. Hangar Bays 5 and Bays 9 were empty. And you'll notice too that there are these interesting tracks here, and these were used to pull the craft out of the hangar bays so that they could be test flown on the tarmac immediately from the entrance of the facility. Hangar Bay 6 was the man-made reproduction of the P-24 Roswell craft that was in Hangar Bay 6. Hangar Bay 7, again, that Dan believed, but could be completely confirmed, that this was the 1953 Kingman UFO crash retrieval vehicle, was covered by a tarp. Hangar Bay 8 contained a black isosceles triangle. They called it the licorice drop, according to Dan Burish. And I will mention that everything from Hangar Bay 1 to Hangar Bay 7 were all extraterrestrial vehicles. Hangar Bay 8 was the only alien vehicle, because there's a difference between extraterrestrials and aliens. And according to Dr. Dan Burish, the exterior configuration, or what it looked like when you saw this craft, it looked like a black liquid mercury that you could fall into. It was a very unique surface texture on this particular craft. So, we've got Bob Lazar stating that S4 exists. That's what he said back in 1988, 1989. We've got Dr. Dan Burish coming forward stating that S4 exists. We also have Bill Uhouse, who worked on the flight simulators at S4 and at Los Alamos National Lab. So we've got 3 independent people confirming the same thing. You'll see the cutaway AutoCAD drawing originating from Bill Uhouse, indicating that there was a flight simulator, a flying saucer flight simulator that was attached to a gimbal mount, and you could rotate this thing almost up to 90 degrees. There was a diagnostic cable attached to the vehicle when it was static, but when it was energized, the diagnostic cable gets released, and then you could quote-unquote fly the vehicle at that time. So, the P-45 craft was the sport model, measured 52 feet in diameter. It was 16 feet high. It had a smooth, polished aluminum exterior configuration. And then I want to take you inside here, show you some of the interior components. It had 3 different levels. We've got the lower bay, we've got the mid-deck, and the upper deck. So that's what we've got right there. Now, let's zoom inside. We'll take a look at what it looks like inside. On the bottom section of the vehicle, there were 3 gravity amplifiers. Right above that, we have the mid-deck, which contained 3 gravity amplifier heads, 3 seats that all sat in the same direction, which were too small for human test pilots to fit into. Then we've got a gravity amplifier system here. We've got an antimatter reactor and a waveguide that goes all the way up through the mid-deck and what we believe to be the avionics or navigation department right here, and these are not windows. So that's the layout of the sport model according to Mr. Bob Lazar. Now, spend 15 seconds on the propulsion system of this vehicle. Element 115 is machined into triangles at Los Alamos, transported to S4. It is loaded into the antimatter reactor, and then the target substance is bombarded with protons. And when a proton plugs into the nucleus of an atom of element 115, it bumps its atomic number up to element 116, which immediately decays and releases antimatter. That is the power source for the vehicle in a near 100% thermoelectric generator. So that's a breakdown of the propulsion system. Project Aquarius terminology. Let's talk about some terminology here. Project Galileo. Project Aquarius is nothing more than an umbrella term for everything having to do with mankind's interaction with extraterrestrials. Below that, there are about 5 different programs. The first one is Project Galileo. It dealt with the propulsion system of extraterrestrial and future terrestrial vehicles. So that was the first one. Second one under Project Aquarius was Project Sidekick. Relates to a weapons program. No further information is available from Dan Burish on that program. Project Looking Glass dealt with the physics of seeing the effects of an artificially produced gravity wave on time. The fourth project was a second-generation weapons program which originated with Project Sidekick, no program name provided. The fifth program dealt with a series of biological defense operations which Dan served in the capacity of senior scientist. So those are the programs that fell under Project Aquarius. So how did the J-Rod craft, or what was termed the Kingman 1953 UFO crash retrieval, how did it get to S4? Ladies and gentlemen, it got there by a 40-ton, what's called a dragon wagon tank hauler. That's how they got it there to the facility. Now, in 1953, according to Dr. Dan Burish, there was a UFO crash retrieval at Kingman, Arizona. There were 3 bodies recovered. One died on impact. He was still contained to his biocontainment device. The other one went to Los Alamos, and the third and final one went to Area 51 S4. That's the J-Rod that Dan Burish worked with. Now, in 1954, according to Dan Burish, there was a meeting between President Dwight D. Eisenhower and representatives of the P-52 Orions, and a treaty was signed. A copy of that treaty was kept at Area S4, Level 4-1, and they also gave President Eisenhower something called the Orion Cube, which we'll talk about as well. What is the Orion Cube? It was also known as the Yellow Book. It has nothing to do with phone numbers, okay? What it is it's a 8 by 8 inch square cube, and it's a quantum viewing device